I was 43 when my father passed away, but the weight of family expectations had aged me far beyond my years. The day of the will reading changed everything. When my mother smiled coldly and said, "Nothing for you," no one expected me to pull out my checkbook and rewrite my own story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I lived in the shadow of my younger sister Vanessa's achievements for as long as I could remember. While she traveled the world building her marketing empire, I stayed behind in our small Connecticut town, balancing my modest accounting practice with caring for our increasingly frail parents. Our family home sat on Maple Street, where the same neighbors had lived for decades, where everyone knew everyone's business, and where I, Rebecca Mitchell, had spent my entire life. "You've always been so dependable, Becca," my mother would say, not quite a compliment. The words hung between us, unspoken but clear, dependable, not exceptional. Not like Vanessa, who called from London or Tokyo or wherever her latest business venture had taken her, always with exciting news, always too busy to visit more than once every few years. Dad's health began failing when I was in my late 30s. First came the minor stroke that left him with a slight drag to his right foot. Then the diabetes diagnosis, followed by vision problems, and finally, the early signs of dementia that scattered his thoughts like autumn leaves. Through it all, I was there, scheduling appointments, managing medications, learning to cook meals that wouldn't spike his blood sugar. "Rebecca is our rock," Dad would tell visitors, his hand trembling as he reached for mine. The pride in his voice made the sacrifice worthwhile, even as I watched my own dreams collect dust. I had once planned to open my own financial consulting firm in Boston. I had dated Michael, a kind architect with ambitious plans and a gentle smile. But when Dad first fell ill, I asked Michael to wait. "Just until things stabilize," I promised. 6 months, maybe a year. Michael waited 14 months before accepting a position in Seattle. I received the wedding invitation 3 years later. I sent a crystal vase and a card signed simply, "Wishing you joy, Rebecca." That was 11 years ago. My apartment above the local bookstore remained temporary in my mind long after I'd lived there for a decade. Just until Dad gets better. Just until Mom can manage on her own. Just until Vanessa can take some time off to help. The temporary became permanent, one small decision at a time, until suddenly I was 43, unmarried, with a small accounting practice run from my dining room table and a life measured in medication schedules and doctor's appointments. Vanessa called. Monthly, her voice always slightly rushed, background noises of airports or restaurants creating a soundtrack to her busy life. "How are things back in Sleepy Hollow?" she'd ask, as if our hometown were a quaint vacation spot she occasionally remembered fondly. "How are Mom and Dad holding up?" I would give her the medical updates, simplifying Dad's declining condition into digestible summaries that wouldn't take too much of her valuable time. When she'd ask about me, I'd mention a book I was reading or a new client I'd taken on. I never mentioned the loneliness that settled around my shoulders like a familiar shawl, or how I sometimes drove to the edge of town just to remind myself I could leave if I wanted to. "You should get out more," Vanessa would say, as if it were that simple. "Join a dating app or something. You're not getting any younger, Becca." I always laughed and changed the subject. What would be the point of dating when most of my evenings were spent helping Dad remember who I was or coaxing Mom out of her increasing anxiety? Besides, everyone my age in town was married with teenagers or going through messy divorces. The thought of explaining my life circumstances to a stranger exhausted me before I could even consider it. Mom changed after Dad's diagnosis. The warm, energetic woman who had once baked cookies for the entire neighborhood and organized community fundraisers gradually retreated into herself. She became sharp-edged, quick to criticize, especially with me. Nothing I did was quite right, the house wasn't clean enough, Dad's medication wasn't organized properly, I looked tired and should take better care of myself. "Vanessa always looks so put together, even with her busy schedule," she'd remark, studying me over her reading glasses. "I don't understand why you can't make a bit more effort." I stopped explaining that I was often up at night when Dad became disoriented, or that I was trying to maintain my accounting business while essentially working as a full-time caregiver. I simply nodded and tried to remember that fear often disguises itself as criticism. One rainy Tuesday in April, I was helping Dad with his lunch when he looked at me with sudden clarity. "Rebecca," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "You gave up too much." I stirred his soup, avoiding his eyes. I haven't given up anything important, Dad. Michael, he said. Your business plans. That program in Boston you wanted to attend. I was surprised he remembered. The financial management certification program had been my dream for years, a year-long course at Boston University that would have qualified me to expand my business significantly. I'd been accepted with a partial scholarship, but deferred. When Dad had his first stroke. After the third deferral, they politely suggested I reapply when my circumstances changed. That was a long time ago, I said, helping him hold his spoon steady. Things worked out the way they were supposed to. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He shook his head, a familiar stubbornness briefly animating his features. I never wanted you to stay because of me. Your mother, she always leaned on you too much. Always expected you to be the one who stayed. I wanted to stay, I said, the lie familiar on my tongue after so many repetitions. Dad looked out the window, where rain streaked the glass in crooked paths. When I'm gone, don't let them keep you here. Promise me. Before I could respond, the moment of clarity faded. He looked back at me, confusion clouding his eyes. Is it time for my medicine? That night, I sat at my small kitchen table reviewing client tax returns, but my mind kept returning to Dad's words. Had he seen my sacrifice all along? Had he felt the weight of it? I thought of the certification program, the brochures still tucked in a folder at the bottom of my desk drawer. I'd kept them, though I wasn't sure why. Perhaps as a reminder of a different Rebecca, one who had plans that extended beyond our small town's boundaries. The accounting work I did was respectable, necessary, but not what I'd dreamed of. I helped local businesses manage their books, prepared tax returns for neighbors, advised the occasional client on retirement planning. The work was steady but limited by my need to remain close to home, available whenever my parents needed me. I'd built my life around being accessible, reliable, present, all words that sounded virtuous but felt increasingly like chains. Vanessa called the next evening. I'm thinking of bringing the kids for Christmas this year, she said, the sounds of her busy London life creating static in the background. It's been too long since they've seen Grandpa, and who knows how many more holidays he'll be with us. I didn't point out that she had made the same tentative plan for the past 3 years, only to cancel when more pressing obligations arose. Her husband Elliot's family in the Hamptons. A last-minute business opportunity in Singapore. The children's school commitments. That would be wonderful, I said instead. Dad would love to see them. How is he? The concern in her voice was genuine, which somehow made it harder to bear. About the same. Good days and bad days. He asked about you last week. Did he remember me? He called you the successful one, I said, keeping my voice light. So yes, I'd say his memory is intact in some ways. Vanessa laughed, the sound bright and uncomplicated. And how are you holding up? Mom mentioned you've been looking tired. Of course she had. I'm fine. Busy with tax season. You know, you really should consider hiring some help with Mom and Dad. It's not healthy, you carrying everything yourself. I closed my eyes, counted to 5. We've discussed this, Ness. They don't want strangers in the house, and we can't afford full-time help anyway. Well, I could contribute more financially, she offered, the words coming easily to someone for whom money had never been a major concern. Her husband's family wealth combined with her own successful career meant money was an abstract concept. For Vanessa, a problem easily solved with the right checkbook. It's not just about money, I said. It's about respecting their wishes. Their wishes or Mom's wishes? Vanessa asked, unexpectedly perceptive. Because those aren't always the same thing. She wasn't wrong. Mom had become increasingly controlling as Dad's health declined, insisting things be done her way, rejecting most suggestions for additional support. She wanted me there, handling everything, while maintaining the fiction that she was still the primary caregiver. My role was to do the work while she received the praise from friends and neighbors for her dedication. I'm managing, I said finally. But I appreciate the offer. After we hung up, I found myself looking through old photo albums. There was Vanessa at her college graduation, beaming between our proud parents. There I was at mine, standing slightly apart, as if I already knew I didn't quite belong in the frame. There were birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, family vacations, a visual record of our family dynamics playing out year after year. Vanessa center stage, me slightly to the side, the supporting character in our family story. I came across a photo I'd forgotten existed. Me at 25, standing in front of my first office space, a tiny rented room above the local diner, where I'd started my accounting practice. The smile on my face was unreserved, genuinely hopeful. I remembered that day clearly, the smell of fresh paint, the second-hand desk I'd refurbished myself, the business cards I'd splurged on that read Rebecca Mitchell, Financial Services. I'd had plans then. Goals that extended beyond our small town. I'd been saving for that certification program, had even looked at apartments in Boston. Then Dad had his first stroke, and Mom had looked at me with those eyes, expectant, assuming, and said, "We need you here, Rebecca. Just until your father recovers." Vanessa had been in Europe then, launching her first international office. "I can send money," she'd offered during our brief phone call. "But there's no way I can get away right now. The business is at a critical point." And so I'd stayed. First temporarily, then indefinitely. The small office above the diner was sublet, then given up entirely as I transitioned to working from home to be closer to Dad. The Boston program was deferred, then abandoned. Michael waited, then moved on. Dad died on a Thursday morning in early June. The day was beautiful in a way that seemed almost cruel, sunshine streaming through the bedroom windows, the scent of blooming lilacs drifting in from the garden. I had been reading to him from his favorite Hemingway novel when his breathing changed. I set the book aside, held his hand, and watched as he took his final breaths, peaceful and untroubled. Mom was in the kitchen making tea. She had been doing that more often lately, retreating to perform small, manageable tasks while I handled the more difficult aspects of Dad's care. I called to her, my voice steady, practiced from years of being the calm one in crisis. "He's gone, Mom." She stood in the doorway, teacup in hand, her face a mask I couldn't read. Then she set the cup down carefully on Dad's bedside table, smoothed his hair back from his forehead, and said, "Call Dr. Winters. Then phone your sister." I made the calls, arranged for the funeral home, contacted the pastor. Mom sat in Dad's armchair, looking through their wedding album, speaking only to give specific instructions about the funeral arrangements. I worked through my mental checklist, death certificate, obituary, service details, while grief built behind a wall I'd constructed years ago. There would be time for that later, when the practical matters were handled. Vanessa arrived the following evening, her husband and 2 children in tow. She swept into the house in a cloud of expensive perfume and genuine grief, embracing Mom with the dramatic flair that had always been her signature. "I can't believe he's gone," she sobbed, while her husband Elliot awkwardly patted her back. Her children, Sophia, 15, and James, 12, stood uncomfortably in the entryway, these grandparents essentially strangers to them despite the dutiful birthday and Christmas gifts sent each year. I hugged my niece and nephew, surprised at how much they'd grown since I'd last seen them 3 years ago. "You must be hungry after your flight," I said, leading them to the kitchen where I'd prepared a simple dinner. "Your grandfather would have been so happy you're here." Later, after the children had gone upstairs to the guest rooms I'd prepared, Vanessa found me in Dad's study sorting through his papers. "You've handled everything beautifully, Becca," she said, settling into the leather chair opposite the desk. "I don't know what we'd do without you." The familiar words stung more than usual. "Someone would have figured it out," I said, continuing to organize the documents for the meeting with Dad's attorney scheduled for the following week. "No," Vanessa insisted, her voice softening. "No one could have done what you've done. All these years, taking care of them." She paused, looking around the study with its walls of books Dad could no longer read, the fishing trophies from tournaments he could no longer remember. "I should have been here more." For a moment, I glimpsed something unexpected in my sister's expression, not just grief, but regret. Maybe even guilt. It would have been the perfect opportunity to agree with her, to finally give voice to the resentment I'd carried for so long. Instead, I found myself saying, "You were building your life, Ness. That's what Dad wanted for both of us. But you put yours on hold." I looked down at the papers in my hands, insurance policies, pension documents, the deed to the house our parents had owned for 40 years. "I made my choices," I said finally. "Did you?" Vanessa asked, uncharacteristically perceptive. "Or were they made for you?" Before I could respond, Mom appeared in the doorway. "What are you two doing?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Just getting Dad's papers in order for the meeting with Mr. Harrington, I explained, referring to Dad's longtime attorney. Mom's expression tightened. I'll handle that, she said, coming into the room and gathering the papers from my hands. These are private family matters. The distinction wasn't lost on me. Private family matters, meaning her and Vanessa, not me. It wasn't the first time Mom had drawn this line, separating me from what she considered the real family unit. Despite my years of care and presence. Of course, I said, standing up. I was just trying to help. You've helped enough, Mom replied, her tone making the words sound more like an accusation than appreciation. Vanessa and I need to discuss some things. Alone. I left them there, retreating to the kitchen where I busied myself with washing dishes that were already clean, wiping counters that gleamed, arranging funeral reception details that had been finalized days ago. Through the closed door of the study, I could hear the murmur of their voices, Mom's insistent, Vanessa's questioning. I didn't try to listen. Some part of me already knew what they were discussing. The funeral was well attended. Dad had been popular in our small community, a former high school principal who had touched many lives, a dedicated member of the local historical society, a familiar presence at town events until his illness had confined him to home. The church was filled with former students, colleagues, neighbors, and friends. I sat in the front pew between Mom and Vanessa, accepting condolences, nodding at appropriate moments during the eulogy delivered by Dad's oldest friend. Mom remained composed, dry-eyed, her back straight as a ruler. Vanessa wept openly, leaning against her husband's shoulder. I existed somewhere in between, present but disconnected, as if watching the scene from a slight distance. During the reception at the house afterward, I moved through the rooms making sure everyone had food and drinks, listening to stories about Dad, accepting embraces and well-meaning platitudes. He's in a better place now. At least he's not suffering. You were such a devoted daughter. Mrs. Calloway, our neighbor for 30 years, clasped my hands in hers. Your father was so proud of you, Rebecca, she said, her eyes watery behind thick glasses. He told everyone how you gave up that fancy program in Boston to care for him. My Rebecca has the biggest heart, he'd say. I swallowed hard, nodding. Thank you for telling me that. Such a shame about your mother, though, she continued, lowering her voice. The way she goes on about Vanessa this, Vanessa that, when you're the one who's been here all along. Mom is very proud of Vanessa's accomplishments, I said automatically. The diplomatic response worn smooth from years of use. Mrs. Calloway patted my hand. Well, I hope they appreciate all you've sacrificed. There'll be some proper recognition now, I expect. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. The house emptied gradually as evening approached. Vanessa's children retreated upstairs, overwhelmed by the day's emotions and the attention of so many strangers. Elliot took a business call in the backyard, his voice a low murmur punctuated by corporate jargon. Mom sat in the living room with her sister who had flown in from Arizona, their heads close together in private conversation. I found Vanessa in the kitchen, staring out the window at the garden Dad had once tended so carefully. Remember how he used to name all his tomato plants? She asked when I joined her. I smiled at the memory. Ernest, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, all his favorite authors. He was so weird, Vanessa said, but her voice was fond. I miss him already. Me too. She turned to face me, her expression serious. Becca, there's something we need to talk about. About Dad's will. I felt a chill despite the warm evening. What about it? Vanessa hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Mom asked me not to tell you, but I think you should be prepared before the meeting with Mr. Harrington tomorrow. Prepared for what? Dad changed his will last year, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Or rather, Mom convinced him to change it. When he was, not always clear-headed. The chill spread, settling in my stomach. And? Everything goes to Mom, and then to me after she's gone. The house, the savings, his pension. She finally looked at me directly. You're not mentioned, Becca. I stood very still, processing her words. Despite suspecting this might be the case, hearing it confirmed felt like a physical blow. I see. I told Mom it wasn't right, Vanessa continued, her words coming faster now. But she said you've already received your share through living here rent-free all these years, through the support they gave you while you built your business. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Support? My business had remained small precisely because I devoted most of my time to caring for our parents. Living here wasn't a choice, I said quietly. It was an expectation. I know that, Vanessa said, reaching for my hand. That's why I wanted to warn you. So you wouldn't be blindsided tomorrow. I looked at my sister, successful, beautiful. Vanessa, who had always been Mom's favorite, who had built her life far from the obligations that had defined mine. I didn't blame her, not really. She had taken the opportunities presented to her, just as I had accepted the responsibilities assigned to me. Thank you for telling me, I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. I want you to know, she added, squeezing my hand, that Elliot and I plan to set something aside for you, regardless of what the will says. It's only fair, after everything you've done. Charity. That's what she was offering. A consolation prize for the dutiful daughter who had given up everything while receiving nothing in return. The storm inside me intensified. That's generous of you, I managed to say. But let's wait until after the meeting tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my small desk in the corner of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the relics of a life put on pause, college textbooks I'd once planned to use for advanced certifications, brochures for the Boston program, a photo of Michael and me at Walden Pond, smiling into the camera with the optimism of people who believed they had time. I opened my laptop and began to calculate my savings, modest though they were. The value of my client list if I were to sell my practice. The cost of moving to Boston, of finally enrolling in that certification program if it still existed, of starting over at 43. The numbers weren't encouraging, but they weren't impossible either. I had lived frugally for years, putting aside what I could between caring for my parents and maintaining my small business. It wouldn't be easy, but it could be done. By morning, I had made my decision. I dressed carefully for the meeting with Mr. Harrington, a navy blue suit I reserved for meeting important clients, pearl earrings that had been a gift from Dad. On my 30th birthday, hair neatly arranged in a professional twist. I looked like a woman in control of her life. It was time to become one. The law office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown, its interior all dark wood and leather-bound books. Mr. Harrington, a balding man in his 60s who had handled our family's legal matters for decades, greeted us in the conference room with somber professionalism. Mrs. Mitchell, Miss Mitchell, Miss Mitchell, he said, nodding to each of us in turn. Vanessa's husband had stayed at the house with the children, making this a women-only meeting that somehow felt appropriate. This was, after all, the culmination of a dynamic that had existed between the three of us for as long as I could remember. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat, opened a thick folder, and began to read the will in the measured cadence of legal language. I listened without reaction as the details confirmed what Vanessa had told me. Everything, the house, the savings account, the investments, Dad's pension, would go to Mom. Upon her death, all assets would transfer to Vanessa. My name was not mentioned once. When Mr. Harrington finished reading, he looked up, his expression carefully neutral. Are there any questions? Mom spoke first, her voice cool and composed. I believe everything is in order. Robert and I discussed these arrangements thoroughly. I doubted that. Dad in his right mind would never have excluded me so completely, not after years of acknowledging my care and sacrifice. This was Mom's doing, her final statement on the family hierarchy she had always enforced. Mr. Harrington turned to me, something like sympathy in his eyes. Miss Mitchell? Rebecca? Do you have any questions? I felt three pairs of eyes on me, Mr. Harrington's sympathetic, Vanessa's guilty, Mom's challenging. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the role I had been assigned in our family. Drama. The reliable one. The one who would accept this final injustice with the same quiet resignation I had shown throughout my life. Not this time. Yes, I said, my voice steady as I reached into my purse. I do have a question. I withdrew my checkbook and placed it on the polished conference table. I'd like to know the current market value of the house on Maple Street. Mom's expression faltered for the first time. What are you doing, Rebecca? Mr. Harrington glanced between us, sensing the shift in the room. The property was recently assessed at $485,000, he answered professionally. It's a desirable location, and the historical features add considerable value. I nodded, uncapping my pen with deliberate calm. And the total value of my father's estate? Including savings, investments, and pension? Approximately $742,000. Mr. Harrington replied after consulting his notes. The majority is in the house and investment accounts. I began writing, the scratch of pen against paper the only sound in the suddenly tense room. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mom's lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. "Rebecca, what do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp with emerging panic. I finished writing, tore the check carefully along the perforated edge, and slid it across the table to Mr. Harrington. "I'm buying my freedom." He looked down at the check, his professional composure momentarily broken. "This is for $250,000. "Yes," I confirmed. "It represents my calculation of the unpaid care services I've provided over the past 8 years. 24-hour availability, nursing care, household management, financial oversight, transportation to medical appointments, medication management. The market rate for such services would actually be higher, but I've adjusted for the room and board I received." Mom's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly expect—" "I'm not finished," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "Mr. Harrington, I'd like to discuss the amendments made to my father's will. Specifically, when they were made and under what circumstances." The attorney cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "The changes were executed approximately 14 months ago. When my father's cognitive decline was well documented," I noted. "His neurologist had already diagnosed moderate dementia at that point. I have copies of those medical records." "Your father was deemed competent to make decisions," Mom insisted, though uncertainty had crept into her voice. "By whom?" I asked. "Because Dr. Winters had already informed us that Dad should no longer be handling complex financial decisions. I have that in writing as well." Mr. Harrington shifted papers nervously. "Mrs. Mitchell assured me that Dr. Winters had cleared your father for legal decisions." I turned to my mother. "That's interesting, since I attended every medical appointment with Dad for the past 5 years, and Dr. Winters never made any such statement. In fact, he specifically advised against making major financial changes once the diagnosis was confirmed." The room fell silent. Vanessa looked stricken, her gaze moving between Mom and me as if watching a tennis match with devastating consequences. "I have no intention of contesting the will," I continued, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "I'm not interested in a legal battle that would drain the estate and drag on for years. What I am proposing is a settlement. The check represents what I believe would be a fair compensation for my services and sacrifice. In exchange, I relinquish any claim to the estate and, more importantly, any obligation to continue providing care." Mom's expression hardened. "So this is extortion? After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "No, Mother. This is a business transaction. You've made it abundantly clear that you view our relationship in transactional terms. I'm simply agreeing to your framework. And if we refuse," she challenged, "then I will contest the will on grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. I'll request a full accounting of how Dad's cognitive state was assessed before these changes were made. I'll depose Dr. Winters about his actual recommendations. I'll submit 8 years of detailed records documenting Dad's decline and my role in his care." I looked her directly in the eyes. "And I'll move out today, regardless of the outcome." The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. Without me, Mom would need to hire full-time professional care, which would quickly deplete the estate she was so determined to control. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take some time to consider options. Family disagreements can often be resolved with, 'This isn't a disagreement,'" I said quietly. "This is a reckoning that's been decades in the making. And my terms are non-negotiable." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice small. "Becca, we can work something out." "Elliot and I can." "This isn't about money," I interrupted gently. "This is about recognition. About acknowledgement of what I've given up. What was taken from me." "Nothing was taken from you," Mom insisted, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "You chose to stay." "Did I? When Dad had his first stroke and you told me, 'We need you here, Rebecca. Vanessa has her career to think about.' When I was accepted to the Boston program and you said, 'How could you even consider leaving now?' When Michael proposed and you reminded me that family comes first, always. Were those really my choices, or were they paths systematically closed off until only one direction remained?" Mom looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The silence in the room grew heavy with unspoken truths. Mr. Harrington, clearly uncomfortable, gathered his papers. I suggest we adjourn for today to consider options. These are complex family matters that I've considered my options for 8 years, I said, standing up. My decision is made. The check is my final offer. I'll be moving out by the end of the week, regardless of whether you accept it. I gathered my purse and coat, suddenly lighter than I had felt in years. Mr. Harrington, I trust you'll explain the legal ramifications if my mother chooses to contest this arrangement. Vanessa, I'll see you back at the house. Mother, the choice is yours. With that, I walked out of the office into the bright afternoon sunlight. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. For the first time in decades, I had defined my own terms. I had broken the pattern of expectation and obligation that had shaped my entire adult life. Whatever came next would be of my own choosing. I drove to the park where Dad used to take us fishing when we were children. The small lake was peaceful in the afternoon light, ducks gliding across its surface, an elderly couple walking slowly along its perimeter. I sat on a bench and allowed myself to feel everything I had suppressed during the meeting: grief, anger, vindication, fear, and beneath it all, a tentative sense of freedom. My phone rang after about 20 minutes. Vanessa. Where are you? She asked, her voice tight with tension. Mom is furious. I needed some air, I said. I'm at Lakeside Park. She's threatening to call her lawyer to contest everything. She says you've always been jealous of me, that this is just your way of causing trouble now that Dad is gone. I closed my eyes, unsurprised. And what do you think, Vanessa? There was a long pause. I think I never realized how much we've taken from you. All these years. I assumed you stayed because you wanted to, because you didn't have bigger dreams or ambitions. I never considered that you stayed because we left you no choice. Her honesty was unexpected, almost disarming. Thank you for saying that. Mom won't accept the check, she continued. She says it would be admitting she did something wrong. But I've been talking to Elliot, and we think there's another way. I'm not interested in charity, Vanessa. It's not charity, she insisted. It's what should have been yours all along. Elliot and I will buy the house from Mom. We'll pay market value, and half of that amount will go to you. I hadn't expected this. Why would you do that? Because it's right, she said simply. And because I want a chance to be the sister I should have been all these years. When I returned to the house, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mom had locked herself in her bedroom, refusing to speak to anyone. Vanessa and Elliot sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before them. We've been running the numbers, Elliot explained, pushing a legal pad toward me. If we buy the house at market value, your share would be approximately $242,500. Almost identical to what you calculated as fair compensation. I studied their calculations, impressed despite myself. Elliot's financial background was evident in the detailed projections and tax considerations. Mom won't accept my check directly, I said. What makes you think she'll agree to this arrangement? Vanessa smiled thinly. Because we're presenting it as a way for her to keep living in the house while freeing up capital for her retirement. She doesn't need to know about our agreement to split the proceeds with you. That's deceptive, I pointed out. Yes, Vanessa agreed without hesitation. Just like changing Dad's will when he wasn't fully competent was deceptive. Just like pretending your sacrifices were choices was deceptive. Sometimes deception is necessary to achieve justice. I had never heard my sister speak this way before. The polished, people-pleasing Vanessa I knew had always avoided conflict, especially with Mom. This new version, principled, determined, was a revelation. When did you become so calculating? I asked, not unkindly. She smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. I've always been calculating, Becca. How do you think I built my business? The difference is, I'm finally using those skills for someone other than myself. Over the next 2 days, Vanessa and Elliot negotiated with Mom. I kept my distance, packing my belongings and contacting clients to inform them of my upcoming change in location. I had decided to rent an apartment in Boston temporarily while I researched the certification program. If it no longer existed, I would find another path forward. The specifics mattered less than the fact that it would be my choice. On the third morning after the will reading, Vanessa knocked on my bedroom door. It's done, she said when I let her in. Mom has agreed to sell the house to us. The papers will be drawn up next week. And my share? Will be transferred to your account as soon as the sale is complete. Elliot has set it up through his business as a consulting fee to avoid gift tax implications. I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes. I can't believe she agreed. She didn't have much choice, Vanessa said, sitting beside me. You made it clear you were leaving either way, and she knows she can't manage alone. This way, she gets to save face and retain some control. And you and Elliot? This is a significant financial commitment. Vanessa shrugged. We can afford it. And honestly, it feels like the least we can do. You've carried this family for years while I built my career and my life elsewhere. It's time I shouldered some of the responsibility. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history settling between us in a new configuration. I found something yesterday, I said finally, reaching for a folder on my nightstand. When I was cleaning out Dad's desk. I handed her a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Dad's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 months before his death, during a period when he still had moments of lucidity. I haven't opened it, I said. I'm not sure I want to know what it says. Vanessa looked at the envelope. You should read it. Whatever it contains, it was important enough for him to write down. She was right. After she left, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. My dear Rebecca, it began in Dad's increasingly shaky handwriting. By the time you read this, I will likely be gone. My mind is failing, but I have moments of clarity that I must use while I can. I want you to know that I see what you have sacrificed for this family. I see the dreams you've put aside, the opportunities you've let pass, the life you've postponed. Your mother may not acknowledge it, and Vanessa may not understand it, but I see it all. The changes your mother wants to make to my will are wrong. I've told her so, but my objections seem to vanish from her memory. She has always favored Vanessa, not because she loves you less, but because Vanessa reminds her of herself, ambitious, restless, always reaching for more. You remind her of what she gave up to become a wife and mother, and that reflection is painful for her. I have set aside something for you. It isn't much, but it's what I could manage without your mother's knowledge. There is a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 247. The key is taped to the underside of the top drawer in my desk. The contents are yours alone. Remember that your life is your own, Rebecca. I never wanted to be your prison. When I am gone, please find your freedom. It's not too late to become the person you were meant to be. With all my love and more gratitude than I can express, Dad. Tears blurred my vision as I read the letter a second time, then a third. He had known. He had seen me, truly seen me, even as his mind began to fail. And he had tried, in his limited way, to make amends. The next morning, I visited First National Bank. The safe deposit box contained $75,000 in savings bonds, purchased gradually over the years, all in my name. There was also a small velvet box containing my grandmother's sapphire ring, which I had always admired but had assumed would go to Vanessa as the eldest granddaughter. A note tucked inside simply read, "For my Rebecca, who has her grandmother's heart." I returned to the house to find Mom sitting alone in the kitchen, a cup of untouched tea before her. She looked older, diminished somehow, without Dad's steadying presence. For a moment, I felt a flash of the old obligation, the instinct to set aside my feelings and attend to hers. I resisted it. Vanessa told me about your father's letter, she said without preamble. And the safe deposit box. I set my purse down but remained standing. Yes. He always did have a sentimental streak, she said, her tone dismissive but her eyes uncertain. Making private arrangements behind my back. He was trying to be fair, I said. To acknowledge what I've given to this family. Mom looked out the window, her profile sharp against the morning light. You make it sound like you were forced, Rebecca. No one held a gun to your head. You could have left any time. Could I? I asked quietly. Every time I tried to build something for myself, you reminded me of my obligations here. I needed you, she said, her voice suddenly small. Your father needed you. Yes, you did. And I was here. For 8 years, I was here. I don't regret caring for Dad. I regret that my care was expected rather than appreciated. That it was taken for granted rather than acknowledged. She turned to face me, her expression a complex mixture of defiance and vulnerability. What do you want from me, Rebecca? An apology? Gratitude? What would that change now? Nothing, I admitted. It wouldn't change the past. But it might change how we move forward. Mom's shoulders sagged slightly. I don't know how to be the mother you want me to be. I never have. It was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever said to me. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but a confession of limitation. For Mom, that was monumental. I'm not asking you to be different, I said carefully. I'm just asking you to see me. To recognize that my life has value and purpose beyond what I can do for you. That my dreams matter as much as Vanessa's. She didn't respond directly, but she didn't argue either. Progress, of a sort. I'll be moving to Boston next week, I told her. I've found an apartment, and I'm looking into the certification program again. So you're abandoning me now that your father is gone, she said, but the accusation lacked its usual force. No, Mom. I'm living my life. Finally. Vanessa and Elliot will be here. They'll make sure you're taken care of. And I'll visit. I paused. But as a daughter, not a caretaker. She nodded stiffly, and I knew it was the closest thing to acceptance I was likely to get. Mom would never fully understand or approve of my choices. Her worldview was too firmly established, her expectations too deeply ingrained. But perhaps she could learn to respect my boundaries, even if she didn't understand them. As I climbed the stairs to continue packing, I felt the weight of years lifting with each step. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibilities that had long seemed out of reach. I thought of Dad's letter, tucked safely in my purse. It's not too late to become the person you were meant to be. No, it wasn't too late. It never is. Boston greeted me with a crisp September breeze, a city alive with possibility. My apartment was small but flooded with natural light, a third-floor walk-up in a brownstone near the Charles River. The first morning I woke there, I stood by the window watching students with backpacks hurrying to classes, business people clutching coffee cups, joggers along the riverside path. All these lives in motion, all these people with purpose. Now I was one of them. I had been in Boston for 3 weeks when I received an email from the director of the Financial Management Certification Program. We're delighted to inform you that your application has been accepted, it read. Your previous deferments have been noted, and we've taken into account your extensive practical experience in the field. I read the email 4 times, letting the reality sink in. Classes would begin in January, giving me time to settle in, reorganize my client base to a virtual model, and prepare for this new chapter. I felt a surge of emotion, vindication, excitement, and beneath it all, a tremor of fear. What if I had waited too long? What if I couldn't compete with younger students who hadn't spent years putting their ambitions on hold? That evening, I called Vanessa to share the news. That's incredible, Becca, she exclaimed, her enthusiasm genuine. I knew they'd accept you. They'd be fools not to. I'm nervous, I admitted, a confession I couldn't have made 6 months earlier. It's been a long time since I was in a classroom. You'll be fine, Vanessa assured me. You've been doing this work for years. The practical experience you bring will be invaluable. How's Mom? I asked, changing the subject. There was a slight pause. Managing. She doesn't say much about you leaving, but I caught her looking at your old photos yesterday. Is she giving you and Elliot a hard time about the house purchase? Nothing we can't handle, Vanessa said lightly. The papers are signed. The money should be transferred to your account by the end of the week. I felt a twinge of guilt. I'm sorry you had to step in like this. Don't be, Vanessa said firmly. It's long overdue. And honestly, it feels good to finally take some responsibility. I've been the family golden child for too long without earning it. Her self-awareness surprised me. Perhaps we were both growing in ways we hadn't anticipated. Have you started looking for office space? She asked. I glanced around my apartment, where I'd set up a temporary desk in the corner of the living room. Not yet. I want to get through the first semester of the program before making any major investments. For now, I'm working remotely with my existing clients and picking up a few new ones here locally. Smart, Vanessa approved. Though I have no doubt your business will take off once you have that certification. You've always had a head for finance. Her praise felt foreign but welcome. For so long, Vanessa had been the accomplished one, the successful one. Having her acknowledge my abilities, even in this small way, was healing. After we hung up, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset over the river. 20 years ago, I had dreamed of a life not unlike this one, independent, purposeful, forward-moving. It had taken a winding, often painful path to get here, but perhaps that made the achievement all the sweeter. My first day of class arrived with a January snowfall that blanketed the city in pristine white. I dressed with care, a charcoal pantsuit, a deep blue blouse, sensible but stylish boots for navigating the snowy sidewalks. Professional, polished, but not trying too hard to look younger than my 43 years. The classroom was in a modern building on the university campus. All glass and light. I arrived early, choosing a seat in the middle row, not hiding in the back, but not claiming the front row enthusiasm of the 20-somethings either. As other students filtered in, I noted with relief that I wasn't the only one with silver threading through my hair. There were perhaps 5 of us in our 40s or 50s among the 20 students, all of us with the slightly anxious look of people returning to academia after a long absence. Professor Daniels was a compact woman in her 60s with short gray hair and penetrating eyes behind stylish glasses. She surveyed the room with a slight smile. "Welcome to Advanced Financial Management Strategies," she began. "Look around you. Every person in this room has a different story, a different path that led them here. Some of you are just beginning your careers. Others, her eyes met mine briefly, are reinventing yourselves after years of experience. Both perspectives are valuable. Both journeys have merit." I felt something loosen in my chest. Both journeys have merit. Such a simple statement, yet so affirming. For our first exercise, she continued, "I'd like each of you to take 2 minutes to introduce yourself and share what you hope to gain from this program. Let's start with." She consulted her roster. "Rebecca Mitchell." "Of course." I took a steadying breath and stood. "I'm Rebecca Mitchell," I began. "I've run a small accounting and financial services practice for the past 15 years, primarily serving individuals and small businesses. I originally applied to this program almost a decade ago but had to defer due to family obligations." I paused, considering how much to share. Those obligations have now been fulfilled, and I'm here to expand my expertise and grow my practice into areas I've previously been unable to explore. Professor Daniels nodded. "What specific areas interest you, Ms. Mitchell?" "Nonprofit. Financial management," I said without hesitation. "And retirement planning for women who've had non-traditional career paths." The latter had come to me only recently, born from my own experience and the realization that many women put their financial futures at risk while caring for others. If I could help them navigate those challenges, perhaps my own detour would serve a greater purpose. "Excellent," Professor Daniels said. "We'll certainly cover both areas in depth. Welcome to the program." As I sat down, I noticed a woman about my age in the back row giving me an appreciative nod. Later, during the break, she approached me. "Carol Winters," she said, extending her hand. "I resonated with your introduction. I put my career on hold for 12 years to raise my children. Coming back hasn't been easy." "Rebecca," I replied, shaking her hand. "And no, it isn't easy. But necessary, I think." "Absolutely necessary," she agreed with feeling. "Listen, a few of us non-traditional students are forming a study group. Would you be interested?" This simple invitation, to be included, to be part of a community of people on similar journeys, warmed me unexpectedly. I'd like that very much. The study group became an anchor in my new life. We met twice weekly in a coffee shop near campus. Carol, myself, Thomas, a former military officer transitioning to civilian life, Anita, returning to work after caring for her ill husband, and occasionally James, a semi-retired investment banker seeking a second career. We reviewed cases, prepared for exams, and most importantly, shared the unique challenges of reinvention in midlife. "I keep waiting for someone to expose me as a fraud," Anita confessed one evening as we worked through a complex tax strategy problem. "Like they'll suddenly realize I don't belong here." "Imposter syndrome," Thomas nodded. "I feel it every day. 20 years commanding troops, and I'm intimidated by 22-year-olds who can calculate ROI in their heads." "But that's just it," I said, looking around at these people who were becoming friends. "We bring something they don't have. Experience. Perspective. Resilience. Wisdom," Carol added. "Though I hate how wise I've had to become." We laughed. The kind of laughter that comes from shared understanding. None of our paths had been easy or straightforward. All of us had faced detours, sacrifices, and now, the challenge of beginning again when many of our peers were comfortably established in their careers. One Saturday morning in early March, I was surprised to receive a call from Mr. Harrington, my father's attorney. "Rebecca," he said, his voice formal as always. "I hope you're well. I'm calling because a situation has arisen regarding your mother's affairs." My stomach tightened. What kind of situation? It appears she's been making some concerning financial decisions. She's withdrawn significant amounts from her accounts and seems confused about where the money has gone. "Your sister asked me to reach out to you." I closed my eyes, unsurprised yet still disappointed. Mom had always been financially savvy, but grief could do strange things to a person's judgment. And if her cognitive state was declining as well. "Has Vanessa spoken with her about it?" "She's tried," Mr. Harrington said. "Your mother becomes defensive. She trusts you with financial matters, despite recent events. Despite writing me out of the will," he meant. "Despite our painful confrontation. Despite everything." "I see," I said, trying to sort through my conflicting emotions. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Mr. Harrington? Perhaps you could review her accounts? Advise on setting up some protections? Your sister mentioned you're pursuing advanced financial certification now." The request was reasonable. Professional. Treating me as an expert rather than just a dutiful daughter. That subtle shift in framing made all the difference. "I'll speak with Vanessa," I agreed. "If Mom is agreeable, I can set up a system to monitor unusual activity and establish some safeguards." "Thank you, Rebecca. And if I may say so, it's good to hear you sounding so resolute." After we hung up, I sat with the complexity of my feelings. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything to rush back home, abandoning my own needs to address this crisis. Now, I was approaching it as the professional I was, willing to help but maintaining boundaries, offering expertise rather than unlimited availability. Later that day, I called Vanessa to discuss the situation. "Thanks for being willing to help," she said, her voice tired. "I know it's asking a lot, considering everything." "It's not about the past," I said. "It's about making sure Mom is financially secure now. Tell me what you've observed." Vanessa detailed several concerning incidents: Mom giving large sums to a questionable investment scheme, forgetting about automatic payments, becoming confused about which bills had been paid. "It's like watching Dad all over again," she concluded. The early stages, anyway. The parallel hadn't escaped me. "Has she seen Dr. Winters?" "She refuses. Says there's nothing wrong with her mind, just her heart since Dad died." I considered the options. I can set up a monitoring system on her accounts to flag unusual transactions. But for it to work, she needs to agree. She needs to see it as help, not control. "That's where I'm stuck," Vanessa admitted. She sees any suggestion of assistance as an attempt to take away her independence. I understood that fear all too well. Let me talk to her. Not as her daughter who she feels abandoned her, but as a financial professional. "When can you come?" Vanessa asked automatically. "I don't need to come," I said firmly. "We can do this by phone or video call. I have midterms next week, and clients who depend on me." There was a pause, then Vanessa said, "Of course. Sorry. I'm falling into old patterns." "You have your own life now." "Yes," I confirmed. "I do. And that doesn't mean I don't care or won't help. It just means I'll help in ways that also respect my obligations to myself." The conversation with Mom was difficult but productive. I approached it purely as a financial advisor, keeping emotion out of the discussion. I explained the systems I wanted to implement, the protections they would provide, and most importantly, how they would help her maintain independence longer by preventing costly mistakes. "You always did have a good head for numbers," she said grudgingly. "Better than Vanessa, though don't tell her I said so." It was the closest thing to a compliment she had offered in years. I accepted it with a simple, "Thank you." "Your father would be proud," she added after a moment. "Of what you're doing now. The program. He always said you had potential, if you'd just use it." The words stung slightly, the implication that I hadn't been using my potential all those years I'd spent caring for them. But I let it go. Mom's understanding of my choices would always be limited by her own perspective. "I appreciate that," I said. "Now, let's talk about setting up automatic bill payments to make sure nothing gets overlooked." By the end of the call, we had established a workable system. Mom had agreed to allow me remote access to her accounts for monitoring purposes, and I had promised to respect her autonomy while providing a safety net. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As March turned to April, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't anticipated. The coursework was challenging but invigorating. My small client base was growing steadily through referrals. The study group had evolved into genuine friendships, complete with occasional dinners and weekend outings that had nothing to do with finance. One evening, as we left class, Professor Daniels called me aside. "Rebecca, do you have a moment?" I nodded, curious. "I wanted to discuss your midterm project on retirement planning for caregivers. It's exceptional work." "Thank you," I said, pleased but slightly embarrassed by the praise. "The analysis you've done on the financial impact of caregiving gaps, it's not just academically sound, it's important work." She regarded me thoughtfully. "Have you considered developing this into something larger? Perhaps a specialized consulting practice or even a nonprofit initiative?" I hadn't, but the suggestion resonated immediately. "I've experienced those impacts firsthand," I admitted. "It would be meaningful to help others navigate that terrain." "There's a conference in Chicago next month focusing on women's financial security," Professor Daniels continued. "I've been invited to speak on a panel about innovative approaches to retirement planning. I think your perspective would be valuable. Would you consider co-presenting with me?" The offer was unexpected and slightly terrifying. Public speaking had never been my strength, and presenting at a professional conference was far outside my comfort zone. But wasn't that the point of this new chapter? To stretch beyond the familiar, to claim space I had previously yielded to others? "I'd be honored," I said, surprising myself with my confidence. "Thank you for the opportunity." As I walked home along the river, I called Vanessa to share the news. "That's incredible," she exclaimed. "My little sister, the financial expert, presenting at conferences." "Hardly an expert," I demurred. "But it is exciting. Are you nervous about the speaking part? I remember how you used to hate giving reports in school." I smiled at the memory. Terrified. But also determined. "This matters to me." "You know what this reminds me of?" Vanessa said. "That poetry competition in high school. The one where you almost didn't go on stage because you were so scared, but then you won first place with that Emily Dickinson analysis." I had forgotten about that. Dad was so proud, I recalled. He bought me that fancy leather journal afterward. I was jealous, Vanessa admitted with a laugh. "I never got that kind of reaction from him, not even when I made varsity cheerleading." "Really? I always thought you were his favorite." "No, that was Mom's narrative," Vanessa said. "Dad always had a special connection with you. The quiet, thoughtful one who saw beneath the surface of things. Mom never understood that kind of depth." Her insight startled me. All these years, I had accepted Mom's version of our family dynamics, Vanessa the star, me the reliable supporting player. It had never occurred to me that Dad might have seen things differently, that he might have valued qualities in me that Mom overlooked. "I wish he could see what you're doing now," Vanessa continued. "Building this new life, helping other women avoid the trap you fell into." "It wasn't entirely a trap," I said, feeling the need to be fair. "I made choices, even if they were heavily influenced by expectation and obligation. And some good came from those years." "Like what?" Vanessa sounded genuinely curious. I considered the question as I watched the sunset reflect on the river. "Resilience. Patience. The ability to see what people need before they ask. Those are valuable skills in any context." "You're remarkable, you know that?" Vanessa said. Softly. "After everything, you're still finding the silver lining." "Not always," I admitted. "I have plenty of moments of regret and resentment. But I'm learning that looking backward too much keeps me from moving forward." After we hung up, I continued my walk, reflecting on how much had changed in 6 months. Not just externally, the new city, the program, the expanding business. But internally. The way I saw myself, my past, my potential. The way I engaged with my family, setting boundaries without severing connections. The way I had learned to value my own needs without apologizing for them. The following weekend, I received an unexpected email from Michael, my former fiancé. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," he wrote, "but I recently heard from a mutual acquaintance that you've moved to Boston to pursue that certification program you once talked about. I just wanted to say I'm happy for you. You always had such vision for what you could accomplish given the chance." I sat with the email for a long time, memories surfacing of the life we had planned together, the future that never materialized. There was no bitterness in his message, just genuine goodwill. After careful consideration, I replied with equal warmth, sharing some details about my new path without dwelling on the past. His response came quickly. I'm in Boston occasionally for work. Perhaps we could meet for coffee sometime? As friends. I'd love to hear more about your new venture. The suggestion didn't provoke the anxiety I might have expected. The idea of seeing Michael again, not as the one who got away or a symbol of what I had sacrificed, but simply as someone who had once been important to me, felt right. Another step in the integration of my past with my present. I'd like that, I wrote back. My schedule is quite full with classes and clients, but I could make time in late April. Setting those parameters, making it clear that I would fit him into my life rather than rearranging my life to accommodate him, was a small but significant shift. The old Rebecca would have been available whenever he suggested. The new Rebecca had priorities of her own. As April progressed, I threw myself into preparing for the Chicago conference. Professor Daniels and I met weekly to refine our presentation, focusing on practical strategies for women who had taken career breaks for caregiving. I drew heavily on my own experience, translating personal lessons into actionable financial advice. Your perspective is invaluable, Professor Daniels told me during one of our sessions. You've lived this reality in a way most financial advisors haven't. That authenticity comes through in how you frame these strategies. I spent so many years seeing my experience as a detour, a deviation from the path I should have taken, I admitted. It's strange to now view it as specialized knowledge, something that adds value rather than detracting from my professional credibility. The most powerful insights often come from our deepest challenges, she said. The trick is to transform them from wounds into wisdom. Wounds into wisdom. The phrase stayed with me, reshaping how I viewed the past 2 decades. What if those years hadn't been a sacrifice or a mistake, but rather an intensive education in human needs, in family dynamics, in the hidden costs of care work? What if my unique path had prepared me for a contribution I couldn't have made otherwise? The night before the conference, I called Mom. Our relationship remained complicated, but our weekly financial check-ins had evolved into slightly more personal conversations. She would never fully understand or approve of my choices, but a fragile respect had begun to develop. I'm nervous about tomorrow, I confessed, surprising myself with the vulnerability. The conference, she asked. You'll do fine. You always were good at explaining things clearly. The compliment, offered so matter-of-factly, caught me off guard. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. Your father used to say you had teacher hands, she continued. The way you would point things out, break them down step by step. He said you got that from his mother. This was new information. Dad seeing a connection between me and the grandmother I had barely known. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, Mom said, an edge creeping into her voice. Because you left. I took a deep breath, refusing to be pulled into the old pattern of guilt and defensiveness. I didn't leave you, Mom. I started living my own life. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Perhaps, she conceded, which from her was practically a declaration of support. In any case, you'll do well tomorrow. You know what you're talking about, and that's more than can be said for most people who give speeches. I smiled despite myself. Mom's compliments would always come wrapped in thorns, but they were compliments nonetheless. Thank you, I said again. I'll let you know how it goes. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the journey that had led me to this moment. The will reading that had broken something open in me. The check I had written as both settlement and declaration of independence. The painful conversations and difficult boundaries. The small apartment overlooking the river. The classroom where I was student and expert simultaneously. The study group that had become a circle of friends. The presentation tomorrow that would transform my personal story into professional insight. It hadn't been a straight line. It hadn't been easy. But standing at this midpoint, looking both backward and forward, I could see the purpose in the path. The wounds were becoming wisdom. The detour was becoming destiny. And I was becoming, at last, the person I was meant to be all along. Standing at the podium in the Chicago Conference Center, I felt a momentary surge of panic. The room was larger than I had anticipated, filled with financial professionals in crisp suits and elegant dresses, their expressions attentive but evaluating. Professor Daniels had just introduced me as a practitioner who brings both professional expertise and lived experience to the critical issue of financial planning for caregivers. I looked down at my carefully prepared notes, then set them aside. These people didn't need to hear rehearsed statistics. They needed truth. 8 years ago, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. I was faced with a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. My father had suffered a stroke. My mother couldn't manage his care alone. My sister lived across the country with her own family and career demands. I had a thriving small business, a relationship heading toward marriage, and an acceptance letter to a prestigious certification program. Everyone looked to me to set these things aside. Everyone expected I would stay. The room was silent, faces focused on mine with unexpected intensity. I stayed for 8 years, I continued. I became the primary caregiver while maintaining a scaled-back version of my practice. I watched my contemporaries advance in their careers, build their retirement funds, increase their earning potential. I watched my own financial future grow increasingly precarious despite being a financial professional who knew better. I paused, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. My story is not unique. According to our research, women are 4 times more likely than men to reduce work hours or leave jobs entirely for family caregiving. The average female caregiver loses over $300,000 in lifetime wages and benefits. Beyond the measurable financial impact, there are opportunity costs that can never be calculated: promotions not received, skills not developed, networks not built. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the strategies Professor Daniels and I had developed: specialized retirement catch-up plans, career re-entry programs, financial products designed specifically for those with caregiving gaps in their work history. I spoke with growing confidence, my personal story weaving through the professional recommendations, giving them context and urgency. The financial services industry has failed these women, I concluded. We've treated their caregiving years as a regrettable absence rather than valuable work. We've offered generic solutions to specific challenges. We've ignored their unique strengths: resourcefulness, efficiency, crisis management, developed during caregiving years. It's time we recognize caregiving as the economic contribution it is and create financial tools that reflect that reality. The applause that followed was enthusiastic, surprising me with its warmth. As Professor Daniels joined me at the podium for the Q&A session, she whispered, "Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." The questions came rapidly: specific inquiries about implementation, requests for clarification on technical points, personal stories that echoed my own. I answered with a certainty born of experience, no longer feeling like an imposter but like someone with valuable insights to share. Afterward, a line of attendees formed to speak with me personally. Financial advisors wanting to better serve their caregiving clients. Women sharing their own caregiving journeys. Representatives from investment firms interested in developing specialized products for this underserved market. "You've identified a significant gap in our industry," said a distinguished woman who introduced herself as the Director of Product Development for a major financial services company. "I'd like to explore having you consult on a new initiative we're considering. Here's my card. Let's talk next week." By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, I had collected 17 business cards and 6 specific consultation requests. I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the response and the possibilities suddenly opening before me. My phone rang. "Vanessa. How did it go?" she asked eagerly. "Better than I could have imagined," I admitted, still processing the day's events. "It seems I've stumbled onto something important. There's this whole segment of women whose financial needs aren't being met because of caregiving responsibilities." "Not stumbled," Vanessa corrected. "You lived it. You recognized a problem others were overlooking. That's not stumbling, that's insight." I smiled at her support, so different from our dynamic a year ago. "Maybe you're right. Anyway, several companies want to talk about consulting opportunities. One is even discussing developing specialized financial products based on our recommendations." "That's incredible, Becca. See what happens when you finally put yourself first? All those years of sacrifice are becoming the foundation for something meaningful." Her words echoed my own recent thoughts about wounds becoming wisdom. "It's strange," I mused. "I spent so long feeling that those years were a detour from my real life. Now they might become the cornerstone of my career." "Life rarely moves in the straight lines we expect," Vanessa said philosophically. "Speaking of which, I have some news from home." I tensed slightly, conditioned to expect problems. "Mom? Actually, yes, but not what you're thinking. She's Been seeing someone. Seeing someone? As in dating? The concept was so unexpected I could hardly process it. Harold Winters. From her church group. They've been having dinner together twice a week. She didn't want me to tell you because she thought you'd disapprove. I laughed, genuinely amused. Why would I disapprove? That's wonderful. I think she feels disloyal to Dad somehow. Or maybe she's worried you'll think she's being frivolous. While you were busy building a serious career. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of Mom criticizing my choices, she was now concerned about my judgment of hers. Tell her I think it's great that she's finding companionship. Life is too short to spend it alone if you don't want to be. After we hung up, I stood at the hotel window looking out at the Chicago skyline, lights twinkling against the night sky. 1 year ago, I had been in my childhood home, measuring insulin doses and managing my father's increasingly confusing finances. Now I was in a luxury hotel room with a view, being asked to consult for major financial institutions, watching my mother begin a new chapter of her own. The path from there to here had not been smooth or straight. It had required confrontation, painful truths, difficult boundaries. It had meant writing that check at the will reading, not just a financial transaction but a declaration of worth, a reclaiming of value. It had meant walking away from the familiar into uncertain terrain. It had meant believing I deserved more than what had been allocated to me by others. The next morning, I participated in a roundtable discussion with other financial experts, contributing perspectives that were uniquely mine. No longer hesitant or apologetic, I spoke with the authority of someone who had both lived and studied the issues at hand. Several participants approached me afterward to continue the conversation, treating me as a peer rather than a newcomer. Professor Daniels joined me for lunch before my flight back to Boston. You've made quite an impression, she observed. Raymond Chen from Meridian Investments asked specifically about your availability for a project they're launching. It's overwhelming, I admitted. Yesterday I was just a student trying to rebuild a modest practice. Today people are talking about consulting contracts and speaking engagements. She smiled knowingly. This is what happens when you bring authentic experience to professional expertise. You've found your niche, Rebecca. The place where your particular journey creates value no one else can offer. I'm not sure I'm qualified for some of what they're suggesting, I confessed. I haven't even completed the certification program yet. You have 15 years of practical experience and a perspective shaped by real-world challenges, she reminded me. The certification will come. In the meantime, don't undervalue what you already bring to the table. Her words stayed with me during the flight home, challenging the lingering habit of minimizing my worth. For so long, I had been defined by what I gave to others, my value measured in acts of service rather than professional accomplishment. Stepping fully into this new identity, expert, consultant, thought leader, required a fundamental shift in how I saw myself. Back in Boston, I returned to a voicemail from Michael. I heard you were presenting at the Chicago conference. An old colleague attended and mentioned your name. I just wanted to say congratulations. Perhaps we could have that coffee when you're back and settled? I smiled at the coincidence and the reminder of how professional worlds often intersect in unexpected ways. I texted him suggesting we meet the following week at a cafe near the river. The prospect of seeing him again no longer carried the weight of might-have-beens. Instead, it felt like reconnecting with a piece of my history from a new vantage point, not with regret but with perspective. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted him immediately. He had aged well, silver threading through his dark hair. Laugh lines around his eyes adding character to his still handsome face. He stood when he saw me, his smile warm but slightly nervous. Rebecca, he said, extending his hand then changing his mind and offering a brief hug instead. You look wonderful. So do you, I replied, meaning it. Seattle agrees with you. We settled at a small table by the window, ordering coffee and sharing the initial awkwardness of people with shared history meeting as strangers. I can't believe you're finally here in Boston, he said after our drinks arrived. After all those years of talking about it. Better late than never, I said lightly. The certification program has been everything I hoped it would be. And more, from what I hear. My colleague Simon was impressed by your presentation in Chicago. Said you're pioneering financial strategies for caregivers. I nodded, still getting used to describing my work this way. It's become something of a mission. There are so many women, and some men, who sacrifice their financial security to care for family members. The system isn't designed to support them. and you're changing that. There was genuine admiration in his voice. I always knew you had it in you, Rebecca. Even back then. Did you? I asked, curious rather than defensive. I'm not sure I knew it myself. He considered this, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. I saw your potential. Your insight. But I didn't fully understand the pressures you were under. The expectations your family placed on you. I could have fought harder, I acknowledged. Set boundaries earlier. Perhaps. Or perhaps you needed to go through that experience to become who you are now. He smiled ruefully. The timing wasn't right for us. But that doesn't mean it was wrong for you. His perspective was unexpectedly healing, not dismissing the pain of what we had lost, but reframing it as part of a necessary journey. We spent the next hour catching up on the intervening years. His successful architectural practice. His marriage and subsequent divorce. His current project designing sustainable community spaces. And you, he asked. Beyond the professional achievements. Are you happy, Rebecca? The question was simple but profound. I'm becoming happy, I answered honestly. I'm building a life that reflects who I am, not just what others need from me. It's a work in progress. The best kind of work, he said, raising his cup in a small toast. As we parted, he suggested dinner the next time he was in Boston. I agreed, not with the flutter of rekindled romance but with the comfortable warmth of reconnecting with someone who had once been important to me. Another piece of my past integrated into my present on new terms. Spring flowed into summer, bringing changes that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. I completed the first semester of the certification program with honors. I expanded my client base to include a specialized focus on women returning to the workforce after caregiving breaks. I began writing a monthly column for a financial planning journal on the economic impact of unpaid care work. Most significantly, I established a consulting relationship with Meridian Investments to develop a retirement catch-up program specifically designed for former caregivers. The project would allow me to translate my personal experience and professional knowledge into tangible tools that could help thousands of women secure their financial futures. On a warm July evening, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment, my first real entertaining since moving to Boston. Carol and Thomas from my study group were there, along with Professor Daniels and her husband. Michael, in town for a conference, joined us as well, bringing an easy warmth to the gathering. As we sat around my dining table, a vintage piece I had found at a local antique shop and restored myself, enjoying good food and conversation, I felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. These were my people now, colleagues, mentors, friends who knew me as I was becoming, not just as I had been. Later, as Professor Daniels helped me clear dishes, she commented, "You've created something beautiful here, Rebecca. Not just the dinner. A life." I looked around the apartment with its simple, elegant furnishings, books lining the shelves, framed prints I had carefully selected, the balcony door open to the summer breeze and distant sounds of the city. "It's still evolving," I said. "But yes, it feels like mine in a way nothing ever has before. Have you thought about what comes next? After you complete the program?" I had been considering this question with increasing frequency. I'm thinking of establishing a dedicated practice focusing on financial rehabilitation for caregivers, combining consulting, direct client services, and advocacy work. She nodded approvingly. "You could make a real difference in how the financial world addresses these issues. There's also a book there, I think. Your personal story combined with practical strategies." The suggestion both excited and intimidated me. "A book? I wouldn't even know where to begin." "With your truth," she said simply. "The same place. You began your presentation in Chicago." A week later, I received an unexpected letter from Mom. We had maintained our weekly calls about her finances, gradually expanding to include other topics, but written communication was unusual for her. "Rebecca," she began without preamble, "Harold has asked me to accompany him on a cruise to Alaska next month. I've accepted. I'm writing because I want you to know I understand now, at least partially, what you were trying to tell us at the will." Reading. I sat down, surprised by both the news and the acknowledgement. "For most of my life," she continued, "I defined myself through my relationship to others, your father's wife, your mother. When your father needed care, I expected you to make the same sacrifices I had made, to find your worth in service as I had done. It seemed right because it was all I knew. Now I find myself at 71, contemplating a journey I never Expected to take, with a companion I never expected to have. I'm choosing something for myself, perhaps for the first time. It's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I won't pretend to fully approve of how you left or the ultimatum you presented. That's not in my nature. But I recognize now that you are claiming something essential, not just money, but the right to determine your own path. Harold says I should tell you I'm proud of what you're accomplishing. He's a wise man, so I'm following his advice. I am proud, Rebecca. Your father would be too. The letter wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a significant shift, an acknowledgement that my choices, while different from hers, had validity. That we were both, in our own ways and times, learning to prioritize our own needs alongside our obligations to others. I called her that evening. I got your letter, I said when she answered. Alaska sounds wonderful. Harold has always wanted to see glaciers, she replied, a new lightness in her voice. He says we shouldn't wait when there's something we want to experience. Harold sounds like a smart man. He is, she agreed. Different from your father. Lighter somehow. He makes me laugh. The simple admission revealed so much about her emerging identity separate from the role of my father's wife. I'm happy for you, Mom. Truly. Your sister thinks I'm having a late-life crisis, she said with unexpected humor. Maybe I am. But it feels necessary. The best kind of crisis, I offered, echoing Michael's words about necessary work. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over the river, reflecting on the parallel journeys my mother and I were undertaking, different in timing and circumstance but similar in essence. Both of us learning, belatedly but genuinely, to claim space for our own desires. Both discovering that it's never too late to rewrite the story you've been living. The following weekend, I began drafting an outline for the book Professor Daniels had suggested. Not just a financial guide, but a memoir of sorts, tracking my journey from dutiful daughter to independent woman, from financial caretaker to financial advocate. I titled the first chapter, The Check, beginning with that moment in the attorney's office when I had placed my checkbook on the table and declared my worth in terms that couldn't be dismissed. As summer turned to fall, my life settled into a rhythm that felt both productive and sustainable. Weekdays were filled with classes, client meetings, and work on the Meridian project. Evenings often included dinner with friends or quiet hours working on my book. Weekends brought explorations of my new city, occasional dates, some with Michael, others with men I was just getting to know, and regular calls with Vanessa, who had become a true ally in this new chapter of my life. One crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after my father's death, I received an email from a woman named Jennifer, who had attended my presentation at a recent financial planning seminar. Your talk changed how I see my own situation, she wrote. I've been caring for my mother with dementia for 6 years, watching my savings dwindle and my career options narrow. I felt trapped and increasingly desperate. But your strategies for financial recovery, your emphasis on valuing the skills developed through caregiving, they've given me hope that there's a path forward. Most importantly, you've helped me see that advocating for my own needs isn't selfish, it's necessary. I've arranged for part-time professional care for my mother and am updating my resume to return to work. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to honor my obligations to my family while also honoring my obligations to myself. I read the email 3 times, tears welling unexpectedly. This was why the painful journey had been necessary. Not just for my own liberation, but for what it allowed me to offer others facing similar challenges. My experience, transformed into expertise, was creating ripples of possibility for women I would never meet. That afternoon, I had a meeting with the Meridian team about the caregivers' retirement program. As I presented the latest refinements to the model, emphasizing the importance of recognizing caregiving years as productive rather than empty time, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just a consulting project or a career advancement opportunity. It was a mission born from my own struggle, a way of ensuring that other women wouldn't have to make the same painful choices I had faced. What you're creating here is revolutionary, said Raymond Chen, the project director. We're not just developing a financial product. We're challenging how the entire industry values care work. That's exactly the point, I agreed. Financial systems reflect and reinforce social values. By creating products that specifically address caregiving gaps, we're saying that this work matters, economically, socially, fundamentally. As I gathered my materials at the end of the meeting, Raymond added, the leadership team is impressed with your work. There's been discussion about offering you a permanent position as Director of Inclusive Product Development once this project is complete. The offer was flattering and would have been unimaginable a year ago. But as I considered it, I realized it didn't align with the vision I was developing for my future. I'm honored, I told him. But I think my path lies in maintaining independence, consulting, writing, direct client work with women in transition. I can make a broader impact that way. He nodded, unsurprised. I suspected you'd say that. The offer remains open if you change your mind. In the meantime, we'd like to discuss an ongoing consulting arrangement. Walking home along the river afterward, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. A year ago, I had been defined by what I gave to others, valued primarily for my availability and sacrifice. Now I was sought after for my expertise, respected for my insights, compensated appropriately for my contributions. The journey had begun with a single act of courage, pulling out my checkbook at that will reading, assigning a concrete value to what had been taken from me, refusing to accept the narrative that my time and dreams were worth less than others. That moment of defiance had set in motion a cascade of changes, both practical and profound. As I reached my apartment building, my phone rang. Professor Daniels. I have news, she said without preamble. The journal has accepted your article. Series on financial recovery strategies for caregivers. They want to feature it prominently in the next 3 issues. That's wonderful. I exclaimed. I've been working on expanding the 3rd section based on your feedback. There's more, she continued. The publisher I mentioned, Clarion Finance Press, is interested in your book proposal. They'd like to see the first 3 chapters. As soon as you have them ready. I leaned against the railing of my building's entrance, taking in this latest development. This is happening so quickly. Sometimes I can hardly believe it. Because you were ready, Professor Daniel said. Firmly. All these years, you were gathering experience, developing insight, honing your voice. When the opportunity finally came, you were prepared to seize it. Her perspective shifted something in my understanding of the past. Those years hadn't been wasted after all. They had been preparation, difficult, often painful preparation, for the work I was now uniquely qualified to do. That evening, I sat at my desk reviewing the draft of my book's introduction. The words flowed more easily now, shaped by a year of reflection and growth. When I pulled out my checkbook at my father's will reading, I wasn't just making a financial statement. I was declaring that my time, my dreams, my sacrifices had tangible value. That I was not simply a resource to be used by others, but a person with legitimate needs and aspirations of my own. That single act, assigning worth to what had been taken from me, changed everything. It was the first step on a journey from invisibility to agency, from obligation to choice, from martyrdom to meaningful contribution. This book is for every woman who has put her life on hold to care for others. Who has watched opportunities pass while fulfilling expectations that fell disproportionately on her shoulders. Who has been told, explicitly or implicitly, that her dreams matter less. That her time is less valuable, that her sacrifices are simply what's expected. It is possible to reclaim your life. To rebuild your financial security. To transform the skills developed through caregiving into professional assets. To set boundaries without abandoning responsibilities. To create a future that honors both your obligations to others and your obligations to yourself. I know because I've done it. And if I can, so can you. I read the words aloud, hearing in them not just my story but an invitation to others walking similar paths. The check I had written that day had purchased more than my freedom. It had bought the right to redefine my worth on my own terms. And now I was offering that same possibility to others, not through financial transactions, but through the power of example, through practical strategies, through the validation of their experience. Some would say I had lost the inheritance battle but won the war for my future. Others might see it as an unnecessarily confrontational approach to a family matter. But I knew the truth. That moment of standing firm, of assigning concrete value to my contribution, had been essential. Not just for the financial settlement it produced, but for the psychological liberation it initiated. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I felt profound gratitude for the journey, not despite its difficulties but because of them. The painful confrontation at the will reading. The challenging conversations with Mom. The leap into uncertainty when I moved to Boston. The vulnerability of returning to school in midlife. The risk of sharing my story publicly. Each step had been necessary. Each had contributed to the woman I was becoming, not defined by what I gave to others, but by what I chose to create. with my own life. Not valued for my availability, but for my insight and expertise. Not living according to others' expectations, but according to my own deepest truth. The check I had written that day hadn't just been about money. It had been about worth, my worth, which no one could define but me. And in claiming that worth, I had found my voice, my purpose, and finally, my freedom. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.